Welcome everybody to episode 2 of a 6-part series that we're running on Spike Camp. This series is called Sheep Camp, and we are trying to have a wide variety of content and guests for this segments. And tonight we are very excited. Both Blake and I have been waiting to do this for a very long time with our good buddy Kevin Willis, who is by far the most dedicated sheep hunter that we know. And over the last couple of months, we've gotten to know a lot more sheep hunters with this project. So having said that, Kevin's been a very big inspiration, mentor, just a fountain of information for Blake and I over the years. And just want to thank you for that. Also want to thank you for helping empty my wallet, because the sheep hunting thing is pretty expensive. So I joke with people and say Kevin Willis might be my most expensive friend that I know, but a great guy nonetheless. So welcome to the show, Kev. Thank you very much for doing this with us tonight. Maybe we'll start off, if you could give us just a short bio on you and kind of your history and how you became, I know it's a long story on how you became a sheep hunter, but maybe just give us a little background if you would.
Yeah, for sure. And right off the hop, thank you guys for having me on. This is actually really a thrill for me to be on and support you guys. This is a really worthwhile endeavor, what you're doing, Blake and Chuck. And Spike Camp has a really bright future. I think you guys have tapped into something really amazing. So congrats again, and feel really privileged to be on. And so, I came to sheep hunting a little bit later, and I was sort of grew up fishing and hunting, and more like not mountain hunting, but just sort of the regular kind of hunting that you would think, and lots of mountaineering and rock climbing and just being outside. And then sort of in my teen years, I did a lot more backpacking and sort of soloing and overnight camping, and got introduced to the hunting, the mountain hunting game, sort of, I would say right before maybe around 18 years old, and never looked back, and just really started hitting the mountains. And it took me a long time to kind of hone in on what my true passion was, and that was sheep hunting. And I really spent quite a few years. I'm one of the guys that took like 7 or 8 years to actually harvest a ram, and I did everything. I did boat-in trips, I did fly-in trips, I did hike-in trips, and I never had anybody to sort of help me out or point me even in the right direction. I literally just picked X's on the map that looked probable, and there was a lot of expense. I was quite poor at the time, and as a young starving student, and it just took me a long time to kind of find myself and get into the groove. And sort of after high school, I went to university and spent time there getting a degree in biology. And the crowd I hung out with there was into hunting as well. So yeah, we really spent a lot of time outdoors. And so that's kind of how I came into the hunting end of things. And I ended up, let me think here, I can't remember how long ago it was, but I ended up going on quite a few sheep hunts, never seeing anything. And I was really discouraged at the time. And but every year I would go back and do more and more hunts, and with my partner. And quite a little sort of a side story is I ended up seeing a really nice legal ram one year at the end of a hunt. We would hunt region 6. We would wouldn't hunt region 7. We'd hunt region 6 for all those years. And we came around the top one year, and went to the hot springs in Liard. And as we were coming through the rock cut was a really nice big legal ram there. And I was just like, my eyeballs were spinning. I was like hypnotized by this thing. It was such a nice ram to see, a legal ram finally, after striking out for 7 years. And I was really sort of gung-ho to go get this ram. And my partner at the time was like, I'm going to drop you off. And it was too close to the highway. You couldn't shoot it there. But I had these like sort of this cloudy fog over me of like, well, I'm going to try and get it further away from the road, out of the no hunting area. And my partner was like, Kev, do you really want that to be your first ram? After all this hard work, do you want that to be your very first sheep? Are you going to be satisfied with that? And that actually struck a chord, and I obviously pulled the pin, and we came home. And the next year I went solo and ended up harvesting a really nice ram. So one thing I learned is sort of passing on the knowledge is a thing, and it's something that we all should be doing. And because I never had that passed on to me in terms of sheep hunting. And so now I try to do my best to pass that on. And that's kind of where I'm at today. Is I just a regular guy. I have a regular job. I go sheep hunting once or twice a year, and have had decent success, I'd say.
Yeah, right on. I mean, and I can certainly attest to the sharing component of your, of your character, because you've done a lot of that for us. And I always tell Blake whenever we hook up with Kevin for a beer or go to your house, just literally listen to everything the man has to say, because there's little tidbits of gold and little nuggets all the way through. And it's certainly been a big help. And that's honestly one of the main reasons we wanted to get you on here tonight was, for that very reason. So this is a chance to give back and do a little of that sharing again. So can you just tell us a little bit about the Riverjet story? Because I know there's a lot of users, or pardon me, a lot of members on Spike Camp that that you would know and that know you from your days at Riverjet, because that's kind of a unique situation for you. You changed your life for sheep hunting. I know you didn't start Riverjet because it was going to be a career for you. So maybe you can just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. So Riverjet was a great period for me. I came to that. The Riverjet did exist before, but it was a small operation run by a gentleman, and I acquired Riverjet one year at the sheep banquet. I had a few glasses of whiskey there and cornered the guy and said, I want to buy your company. And he was gracious enough to entertain me, and we did a deal the next year. And I never looked back after that. I just started Riverjet, not knowing much about much. I was a jet boater for many years before, but really learned a lot on those northern rivers there. And just a passion of jet boating and hunting really came together, and was able to sort of tie the riverboat thing into the sheep for me. Did I freeze on you guys again, Chuck?
Yeah, just for a second, right at the end, I think, of the Riverjet conversation. So can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep trucking. So how long did you own Riverjet for? I can't remember how long that was.
It was about 10 years that I ran that operation, and met a whole bunch of really cool guys over the years, you guys included, and really got to see some of the some really great meat, really great that I learned a ton sheep hunters hunt from, and that's the thing. I did learn so much from being up there, being surrounded by like-minded people. I was like a sponge those first few years, and I still am now. I'm still constantly learning. But I ran Riverjet for about 10 years, and then it was time for various family reasons, personal reasons, to pass it on. And now there's another gentleman that's having a lot of fun running those rivers up there.
Yeah, right on. I mean, what an experience when you think about it, right? What better way could there be to really get exposed to the whole sheep hunting scene with as far as the country. And I know you spent a lot of time not just transporting hunters, but you used Riverjet as a means to learn the area, learn the mountains, study sheep and all of that. So I mean, that it's just fascinating, like great opportunity, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was, I'd go up there quite early in July, and I'd spend quite a few weeks hiking around and learning those areas, being surrounded by sheep country, learning the trails, the mountains that, just everything up there was just so captivating. And as much, I would put in a ton of effort on the front end to try and find new sheep areas for the guys. And it seemed to work out because I was able to run sort of a very sustainable and successful operation up there. And I like to think I was in the business of making sheep hunters, because I would try and help as many people over the years. And actually, in the beginning, it was mandatory to have I'd actually make the guys buy a membership for the Wild Sheep Society of BC in order to come up on a sheep hunt. So I think you guys might have been.
No, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, and not just that, but I know you did a lot of work like on the trail systems and a lot of that extra trail busting and just getting to know, like telling guys where the good spots were for water and all that. I mean, just amazing work. And there's a lot of guys and girls that can thank you for their success for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the Ultralight game. I can remember back when we first came over to your shop and you were kind of walking us through your gear setup. And I have to say, I think you were one of the first guys I saw that had like an ultralight backpack, and that pack was made, I believe it's a McHale pack, right? You had that custom built for you, and that was probably before the days of the Stone Glaciers and the Kuyus and all that. Tell us a little bit about that story, because that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was always trying to find. Everybody wants to find the latest, greatest, and I wanted a truly custom pack, and got in touch with Dan McHale down in he's in near Seattle there, and went down for it's actually quite an in-depth process to buy with him. He actually sews a custom pack for you. You pick every detail on it, and he will actually send you a pack to fit yourself, and then take photos, and then you send that pack back, and he will finish sewing your pack with your sort of exact measurements and how his pack system fits on you. And he does everything. I remember it was like an hour and a half of measurements, and he measures every detail from your the length of your iliac crest to your exact torso, your hips, everything, all the bone structure. The pack is actually sewed for you. And what I actually liked also was the materials he used back then. I mean, my pack was Dyneema and Cuban fiber, and there weren't many packs using those materials back in when I bought that pack. And it wasn't cheap. You pay for it, but I just wanted a one pack that was tough enough to pack a deboned ram or animal off the mountain, not worry about things breaking and whatnot. And those packs seem to work for me. And there's nowadays, there's a lot of great packs out there. I get asked a lot about backpacks, and the Stone Glaciers are ones, and really good ones. And there's a whole bunch of other ones as well. And I remember the first year Stone Glacier I went to that the Wild Sheep Foundation, and they had a booth there, and I picked up their first pack and went, oh my gosh, like this thing is amazing. It was super light. I thought at the time the material might have been a little light, but for wear and tear, but man, they've sure done right, and they've got a great thing going, those guys, and other companies too, Kuyu and man, I actually ran one of the first Kuyu packs with the Icon frame. I ran I ran Wilderness Wanderer, I ran a Barney's, I ran a Kifaru, I ran what else? Mystery Ranch, like all the sort of the big pack names I've ran. There isn't one that's head and shoulders above another. And I just ended up on a truly custom pack. And yeah, I've been really happy with it, guys. Like it hasn't failed me, put it that way. And I've been with guys where their packs have broke, and that just happened to me last year. My partner, the stays in his backpack actually snapped right in half, and we were just carrying out some rams out of the bush, and sure enough, he broke his. So yeah, I mean, you never know. I just tell people invest in good gear for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when it comes to backpacks, it's kind of like boots, right? You got to find the one that fits you. You got to find, the one that has the features or lack of features. And, if you want an ultralight pack, Blake can agree with this. I've tried every single pack out there too. Now, mind you, I'm a gear nerd and kind of a snob when it comes to that stuff. But this year I'm running the latest Stone Glacier Terminus, the 8700, and so far so good. I mean, I haven't had it out in the bush yet. I've just been training with it, and it fits. It's light. It can carry my whole camp and hopefully a ram as well. So yeah, I totally agree. But it's a fascinating story. Do you know if Mikhail is still making those packs? Is he still in business?
I believe so, but don't quote me on that 100%. His website leaves something to be desired, but I don't really think he's not really in the market for mass marketing his packs.
Sure.
He doesn't sell that many packs, and and you're right, Chuck. Like, I mean, they're like ultralight's a word that people throw around. There are people way lighter than myself, and there are packs that are much lighter than my pack, but there's sort of that balance of robust toughness that you need to carry your camp. And I do a lot of solo backpacking, so I'm carrying my camp and a deboned ram and head and cape and the whole kit and caboodle in one. So there was sort of a balancing act there. And so if you go too ultralight, you can end up sort of tipping the scale one direction there where it can fail on you. So
yeah, there's definitely a fine line between ultralight optimal weight and a safety risk too, right? Like that's the last thing you want is a broken pack. And even on the shelters and sleep systems and things like that, you can push it. Rain gear is another one. You can. I'm not telling anybody here anything they don't know, but there's a fine line. I think you have to figure out what your comfort zone is. So just curious, what do you consider a ready to go pack weight for you for, say, I know you do long trips, so whatever, 12 or 14 days, what do you shoot for? Did you hear me, Kev?
yeah, I'm just having some live stream issues here. Just let me know if you can hear me, guys.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just reconnecting here. Okay, looks like I'm back. So just give me a thumbs up, guys, if you can hear me.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
okay,
we got
perfect.
you. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Okay. So I do longer trips, a lot of solo stuff, and so my pack weight for 12 days is sort of the number I have in mind is 12 days with everything, and that's with my rifle on there, with 7 shells, all my food, all my clothing, and all my optics and everything is about 46.5 pounds. And like I said, there are people that can get way lighter than that, and but that seems to be where I'm at. And the last few pounds is money. You probably know that, Chuck and Blake. Like it's
thousands of dollars an ounce. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just trimming the fat. And that last little bit is just more and more money. It really adds up. And, but like, 40 under a sub 50 pound pack for that amount of time solo to me is comfortable. Makes my hiking a lot more comfortable, and I can really move around.
Yeah, and I think the big variable when you start to get right down to ounces is very personal, and that's in your food, right? Like I know I've talked to you about food before, and you kind of starve yourself, right? I mean, you don't eat a lot of food from what I've seen your food list, and I think that again, I mean, there's a fine line there on nutrition, caloric deficit, and also how uncomfortable do you feel that you can be on a backpack trip? That determines weight too, right? Creature comforts, the little things. I think the say, what's that saying? What if weighs a lot, and it really
Yeah.
does. And if you can try and find dual purpose items that you can carry on your pack. One of the things Blake and I started packing the last couple of years was an ultralight tarp between the two of us. And last year it was a game changer for us for the simple fact that where we were hunting, we had a long ways to go for water, and it was really hard to find. And we set up a water cache in sort of in a hole right by our camp, and we left our tarp there overnight when it was raining, and woke up the next morning, and we had 2 gallons of water, which was like amazing. That saved our hunt.
Wow.
Otherwise, we'd have
Wow.
spent half the time, chasing water, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think you said it to me once before. It's like you have to look at your shelter as a shelter. It's a place to sleep. It's a place to store your stuff. But if you're going to be a successful sheep hunter, you're not going to be in that tent much. So you got to have the right gear as far as rain gear goes, and a layering system and the rest of it, right? So
Yeah.
maybe tell us a little bit about your setup for clothing, and like how do you
Sure.
prep your gear? What do you take?
Yeah. I long ago I separated wants from needs, and that extends for my whole hunting kit. And there are times when I could be more comfortable, but I'm not that comfortable just because I've shaved it right down, and I'm right on that bubble of if I leave other things out, I could leave myself exposed a little bit. So I do have a bit of a redundancy built into my clothing system. And so, like most people, I run, a quick dry layer, like a quick dry t-shirt or whatnot. I tend to run darker colors for all of my base layer stuff because when, through hiking and whatnot, I get wet, I sweat, and dark colors seem to dry faster in the sun than wearing something quite light colored. So you're just little things like that, a lot of little details. And so I wear like a wicking sort of shirt, and typically hiking in my t-shirt in August, I wear a very sort of light hiking pant. And, we all have our favorite boots. I personally run one from the guys down at Lathrops and Sons there. Those guys, I run their, I think it's their handwag that I use. And I've gone through all the different boots over the years, and there's not one that stands out. I've seen them all with the customers with Riverjet, and some fail. I've seen the best brands fail, and I've seen the worst ones hold up. And it's kind of like cars, Ford and Chevy and GMC and Dodge. They all have their advantages. And so that's my base layer, sort of a quick, dry, darker colored base layer. I don't really run any merino wool of any kind, just my personal preference. And then from there, I have just a full layering system all the way up with puffies, lots of puffies. I have 2 puffy jackets, ultralight puffy jackets, puffy pants. And because I'm typically above tree line, sort of tap dancing on the mountains there, I'm able to get away with those light fabrics and not worry about them ripping. So I'm wearing sort of, the trade-off for my system is you're constantly having to stop and layer up or layer down, and you have to be disciplined. You can't, if there's a rainstorm coming, you can't just try and power through it. You have to stop. You have to put on your rain gear. Then you go again. The rainstorm passes. You have to stop. Take off your rain gear, and so you don't sort of overheat and get too sweaty or soaking. So my layering system is a pretty standard one. It's just sort of light materials. I bring sort of a heavier, almost like a sweatshirt type material. They market it as quick dry, but it's any sweatshirt will do. Not like a cotton one, but like I can't think of the actual exact model of the one, but it's one that when I get to camp and I put that on so that I don't get the chills, and it actually will help that under layer dry. It dries usually within a half hour. It's uncomfortable at the time, but after 30 minutes, you're kind of starting to warm up and dry because you've got all your layers on keeping warm. So that's kind of my setup is base layers, and then medium layers, and then sort of one outer layer, and then a rain gear layer as well.
So then, like with socks and underwear, do you take spares?
I bring, so everybody's feet are different, and with proper fitting boots, I think I personally wear a sock liner and then a sort of a lightweight hiking sock. The brand that I run right now is called Darn Tough. They're an excellent brand, but there's also other ones out there. I don't want to be telling guys one exact specific brand, because sometimes it's pretty expensive, and so I just say get what you can afford, get the best you can. So I run sort of a liner sock and then a lightweight hiker, and I'm bringing typically one change of socks and one change of underwear. I know it's gross, but what I do is
46 pounds.
Well,
right?
every night in the tent is a reset. I look at it as a reset. So if I have damp feet from hiking, I go to bed with those socks on, and in the morning everything's bone dry, and it's a good hard reset for the next day.
Yeah, those Darn Tough socks are great. Just a side note, if you do buy them, it's socks for life, because if you punch a hole in one, you just put them in an envelope, mail them back to Darn Tough, and they send you new ones. I started running Darn Tough every day for everything because they got different types, and I haven't bought socks since. So just a sidebar.
Yeah,
there, but
yeah, they're great. They're great socks for sure. And
yeah, exactly.
I didn't know. I thought socks were not. I thought all socks were equal. They're actually not. I was educated by a gentleman, Bob Hodgins from Barney Sports, years and years ago, and he told me that socks are completely different in terms of manufacturing and performance, and that was his recommendation at the time, and I've never looked back. So,
right on. On as far as the sleep system goes, Kevin, are you down or synthetic bag guy? What do you like to run?
I run a down system. The bag I run right now is by a company called Western Mountaineering, and they make various models. On the early season, I'll bring the earlier sort of lighter bag, and later in the year, if I'm doing sort of later hunts, I switch to their warmer bag. But I'm also bringing my puffy gear as well. So I typically sleep with my puffy pants and my puffy jacket, just because the lighter you can get on your sleeping bag, and you can make up that temperature difference by wearing some extra layers. You'll be totally comfortable throughout the night. And even with my medium temperature setup, I've been in the high mountains over in Kyrgyzstan and also in the Rockies here, and been totally comfortable doing that. And so I run that Western Mountaineering bag. I go to absolute great lengths to keep that bag dry, and every single thing in my pack, whether it be food or clothing, is in separate waterproof compression sacks. So the ultra lightweight sill ones, I know there's a company, I think it's called Sea to Summit. They make a really good sort of compression bag that's really lightweight. And my sleeping bag goes in one separately, and everything else does. So if you do have tip over in the creek, or you get a rainstorm that pushes through your pack somehow, or your water bottle spills, which has happened, everything is staying bone dry. So
yeah, I think a lot of guys have switched over to that system where and it also helps with if you have the bags for organization too, right? You don't have to do a yard sale every time you have to have a meal or change a layer or something, right? So
yeah, exactly, for sure.
All right, cool. Let's talk a little bit about water, and two things that I think a lot of people overlook is or maybe don't quite understand. One is finding water. Tips and tricks for that. I know you've given us some gems as far as how to find them, and then water management. I know that's also something that you were pretty disciplined at as far as conserving water throughout the day. So maybe, and I don't think you filter, right? Or maybe you switched now, but I don't think you did before. So tell us about that.
No, I don't bring the actual filters. They're just, and I know a lot of guys do bring those. I just find that I can perfectly feel comfortable drinking water with a little pill that you put in there. It makes it taste like crap, but I'm not there to savor the food or love the water. It's just a necessity. So I bring something that just doesn't take up any space or weight. So I just use like the little purification pills there. And I'm typically mixing my water with some sort of drink mix, so it helps. And so yeah, I mean, I use that sort of system to purify my water. One of the things I do, which is maybe a little different from a lot of guys, is I bring 2 ultralight water bladders. And a lot of guys would, I see show up when I was in the north and taking customers out there, and they would have one big water bladder, and I don't know how many guys would have that fail on them for one reason or another. And by bringing 2 ultralight water bladders, one of them actually just sits in the bottom of my pack. It rarely gets used, but what that does is that's a bit of a redundancy into the system. If you do have one fail on you, you've got a second one. And also, more importantly, when you're up at elevation, you don't have to make these big, because my pack is so light, you don't have to make these big treks for water. When you find your last source of water, you can fill both of those bladders up. And typically my partner and I will have about 23 liters will last us about 3 days. And so we camp, my style is to camp quite high at elevation. I don't usually camp way down in the bottoms. I'm usually up on the mountain. And by having that amount of water up there with 2 of us, it really does help. And I do not really drink that much during the day. My current partner does. He's a bit of a water hog, but I typically will drink about 1 liter of water throughout the day, regardless if I'm sitting or working hard. I just have 1 liter water. Yes, I'm in a bit of a deficit for dehydration, but 1 liter water seems to serve me and lets me sort of stay, where I need to be without having to run down the mountain and try and replenish.
Yeah, and that's a personal thing, right? I mean, your own body, and you know how much water you're going to use. Like you say, your partner, people get cramps, people get headaches. I mean, they get early signs of dehydration just depending on their whole system, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly personal.
That water, when I'm talking about 1 liter a day, is after my last water source. So when I'm hiking in on a trail and I think that I'm coming to my last water source, I'm going to be pounding a whole liter of water and then refilling everything up, my sort of 1 liter water bottle and my water bladders, and then I go from there. So it's not like if I have the opportunity, if I find water up top, I'm drinking as much of it as I can.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Kevin, I got a question for you. Could you talk a bit about your food? I know we touched on it briefly at the beginning, but like maybe just for everyone, like give us an example of a day of like what you would actually consume from the time you wake up to when you go to bed.
Sure. Yeah. So with food, I bring, I've had all of the different foods over the years, but right now I'm using the Peak Performance meals, and I have one of those a day as a dinner. So we'll start there. I'll have a dinner, and during the day, I have typically, I'll just nibble on some nuts or something like a bar of some kind. It might be like a protein bar or something, but that's it. I don't really eat a lot during the day. For breakfast, I'll usually have, what's really light, sadly, are those instant oat things, little instant oatmeals. I'll even actually sometimes have the breakfast version of the Peak Performance makes a great breakfast version. So I'll have that. I don't really eat that much on a hunt. And I know some guys, they can't go without their food. I just don't. I'm not that hungry. I'm typically working so hard in the hikes, gaining elevation, and that's just my style. And I don't spend too much time in one place. And so yeah, for meals, that's kind of my style. I just have, I budget for a Peak Performance dinner every night, and like a hot tea after dinner, and that's it really. Like it's pretty simple.
Is that where you'd say you cut the most weight compared to the average sheep hunter? Or I'd be curious to know, like, is there things that you just don't bring that you see most people bringing that just add pounds to the backpack?
Yeah, I mean, my food is one, like inevitably you're going to have to carry the food and the weight, and you can save a little bit there. Like I said, I don't snack a lot during the day, so it typically is quite a bit lighter. It could be like 20% lighter than the next guy. And it also doesn't take up a lot of room in my pack, being sort of a less volume. Going back to my sleep system there, that thing compresses down to the size of a volleyball. It's quite small. And my clothing, because I don't bring a heck of a lot of extra clothing, that's the size of a volleyball as well. So when you add it all together in your pack, you're not taking this big bulky thing, and it's considerably lighter. So yeah, I mean, food is definitely one that you can save weight, but that comes with an asterisk, because you definitely, if your body needs that, you should be taking that, for sure.
Yeah, and again, that's personal, right? I mean, it's about what the body needs. I don't think it's at the end of the day with most hunters, it's about what the body needs, not so much what the choice of weight that you're going to bring. I know just in the last couple of years, personally for me, I think Blake's got his dial down. He knows exactly what he's going to eat in a day. And, plus or minus, some days when you're just glassing, you're not eating as much. Some days when you're doing a big push, you're going to eat maybe a third more than you did the day before. But for me, I've been able to knock down, like, I think go back 4 or 5 years ago, I probably had close to 2 pounds a day of food, like 1.5 pounds, pound 3/4. And now I know exactly what I need. And I'm just over 1 pound a day, and many days I'm still sitting there with extra food at the end. But it's kind of found that sweet spot where I don't want to drop anymore.
Yeah.
What about? Sorry, go ahead, Kev. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the average weight I would see. Over the years, I took, got to know and take a lot of different sheep hunters, and the average I would see is about a little over 60 pounds for 10 days. 10 to 12 days would be 60 pounds or even more. And, that's, I would see what they would bring for clothes, and they'd have like triple of everything. They'd have 4 pairs of socks, and I think if you can shave things and be really smart about, your moisture and keeping things dry, you can get away like that. Like I said earlier, that hard reset every night in the tent really helps. Having your base layer and your socks and everything bone dry in the morning. And you don't need to bring 4 pairs of socks. You can get away with the ones that you're wearing and then another set as well.
Well, also then you got warm clothes will help you get your ass out of bed in the morning, because otherwise if you're looking at your wet socks hanging there, you're like, oh shit, I don't want to get up.
Yeah.
There's that discipline side of it again, right? So what are some of the tips that you could offer sort of the newer mountain hunters on locating water and signs to look for when, if you're glassing a ridge or glassing a bowl? Like, what tips can you offer them for finding water sources?
Sure. The water thing, finding it up top, it's a bit of luck. It's a bit of skill. You never know where there could be a little spring pop out of the rocks. And a lot of the ones I've found up where I was, working all those years were just boot leather on the ground and stumbling across ones. And I can remember one spot where I actually was watching some mountain goats way up in the rocks, and they were actually in sheep country, really good sheep country. And they all kind of came down and they just stuck their head in the rocks, each one for about, a minute or two. And then the next one would do the same thing. And I ended up hiking all the way up the draw to try and find what was in there. I thought it might be a lick, but it was a little bit of water in there. And that's actually where I ended up getting my water from. It was, made a little pond in there out of rocks and got water from there. So that was just observation of just looking at the animals. There's the typical things. If you see the swale in the ground, there's more likelihood of water. Usually on the mountainside, it's tough because the water's under the scree, and you have to kind of go a little bit lower in elevation. And you can kind of find them just by looking at the draws and the various landforms, a bit of greenery. Usually the vegetation will be a little bit different right at where the water is. So that's kind of what I would do to try and find water, is just combine all those different factors together and just go hike it. You never know until you go look at it.
And then, of course, don't walk by water to look for water, right? If my water bottle's almost full, I'm okay. Just like you said, drink a liter, refill, and go, right?
It takes a lot of discipline to do that, to always be like filling your bottle up, topping it up. Is this our last water source? Yeah, I think it is. Okay, let's fill up our bladders. Oh, well, it's going to add weight. Well, you got it. If you're running 50-pound backpack, putting 10 extra pounds on there, that's no big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we made kind of a mistake on our first day last year when we left the river. We did not load up on water completely at the river. We just had a water bottle each. And part of it was advice from one of the other guys on, you go up this way and there's a creek, you'll be fine. Well, we got started and we were just in a hurry and excited. And we didn't find water. We hiked we bushwhacked for 6.5, 7 hours right to dark. And we were down to virtually no water. And we were just like praying for the creek. And all of a sudden, bang, we come over the hill and in the bush and there was a creek and we got lucky. But that's a mistake you only make once, right? So.
Wow. Yeah. It's definitely, you don't want, like you said earlier, you don't want to be walking by your last water source and hoping. And a lot of guys would say, well, I would always be careful in giving any advice for water, because that spring may not be bubbling out of there from year to year. There are areas up there that I know are really reliable, that never change, but you never know. So like you said, you got to just have that, you got to stop, you got to fill everything up, hydrate. And then if you think it's your last water source, you have to kind of act accordingly.
Hey, let's talk about tactics on sheep hunting. Now we've got the packing and the gear and all that stuff kind of sorted out. What are some of the things you look for? And I guess it's a two-part question. What's your glassing strategy, and your sort of terrain feature strategy that you're looking for when you're on the mountain. It's easy to do the e-scouting and kind of map out the drainages and all that. But when you get out there, like, what's the first thing you do when you get to a bowl? And I guess I got a lot more questions, but are you trying to get to the top, or are you looking from the bottom? I think that's one of the questions that came up earlier today on our on the platform.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I try to, first of all, increase my odds as much as possible by getting into what I feel is really good ram country. And they do say, 10% of the mountain, 10% of the mountains hold 90% of the rams. And, if I'm in an area and I see a whole pile of ewes and lambs, I'm not going to really hang out there too much. I'm going to kind of try and find some mountains within striking distance of those ewes and lambs. But when I do get to an area, let's say I'm not familiar with the area, I'm going to just try and find a vantage point that gives me the best view of the mountain. It really depends on so many factors. There's the time of the day. In the morning, they're going to be up and feeding, but during the hot days of August, they could be bedded down in the tall grass or in the cliffs in the wind. So what I like to do is just find a really good glassing knob or a glassing area. If it means climbing an opposite mountain to see a mountain, I'll do that and just set up there. And it is, there's all different ways to do it, but what works for me is a grid pattern, dividing the mountain up. And you know how when you look at a mountain, there's always like the sexy place that you think you should see rams there. And I avoid the urge to just focus right in on there. And I set up my spotter and I just do a grid. I divide the mountain up and I just go so slow. And I do the whole grid and then I start again and then again. And sometimes it takes me a half hour to do the grid. And I do a lot of glassing. I really have had good success over the years in my areas that I hunt. I tend now to hunt areas that don't hold as many sheep, but hold bigger rams. And so it's all about finding them. So I spend a ton of time trying to find that one or two rams in that area, and not really in areas where there's going to be a band of 10 or 12 or 15 rams in one area.
So when you mentioned the ewes right at the start of that, you said, you're going to start glassing for rams within striking distance. What do you think striking distance is? 1 kilometer, 2, 3, 5? I guess it depends on the terrain, right?
It does. I've seen, I'm pretty familiar with some of those mountain areas up there, and I've seen ram mountains close to where the ewes are, sort of the maternity areas, quite close, and I've seen them quite far, as much as like 4 or 5 kilometers away. And I've seen them pop up in the craziest places as well. And so it is a bit of a, you're armed with the knowledge of sort of where you should be focusing, but be open to looking in non-traditional areas for sheep, for sure. So, it could be anywhere within a few clicks or to even a little bit more.
Yeah, and I guess really too, like I've been asked this before, and now I think this is going on my 5th year of sheep hunting. People have said, well, what terrain are they in? And my answer to that is, well, they can be in any terrain. I mean, for sure, those sexy mountains like you referred to. But just last year, Blake and I were glassing a sexy mountain, and we were right up on a spine, and I turned around and just went over to look over the backside, and there was 4 ewes right below me at 200 yards walking right through the thickest timber you could imagine. And so, like, realistically, they could be anywhere. Do you think it's more so, I guess, on a day-to-day basis? Is it more so a time of day that you think would be more effective as opposed to a certain type of terrain? Like when you're glassing that mountain and you're picking it apart, is it rocks or grass, or do you feel that there's any real difference, or do you think it's better at 5 o'clock in the morning versus 10 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, I definitely am a believer that you should be up early. It takes a lot of discipline, especially if you're tired from a long hike in or whatnot. Sore, it's hard to get out of bed before light. But it's been good for me over the years to be up on the mountain right at the crack of dawn. Uh, the sheep behave where I hunt there. They're up right in the morning, first light, and they're grazing around, moving around. They're a lot easier to spot, and you know they're in the grass, they're in the rocks, they're kind of spread out. They don't sort of congregate in one area all the time. I've never been able to put a real specific pattern on them, on stone sheep in particular. I've got general patterns, but not specific ones. And so, like, during the day when it's hot up there in August, I spend a lot of time up there in July and August, and they are bedded down in the heat of the day, and they're really tough to find then. And I've I don't know how many times Chuck, I think you've actually hunted some of those areas that I've been in there, and where they sit in the grass, you'll never see them. They're so hard to find, and maybe they'll stand up and stretch and then rebed down again. And that's when you can kind of pick up that horn or see his white ass. And looking at toward the evening is a good time as well. Those sheep are up and feeding when it cools off. They'll be up, if the bugs are bad, they could, where I hunt, they'll either be up high on the ridges or they'll be down in the trees, in the timbers. And so right before, as it's getting dark or cooling off, is a really good time. You want to be situated and glassing and spending as much time just slowly glassing. And, some guys like to have a nap during the middle of the day. It seems like my partner always does. I never get to. And I like to just keep glassing. I've picked out a lot of sheep over the years, just seeing that sort of tip of the horn or the ear flicker in the grass. And then it's a waiting game to see them when they stand up.
Well, yeah. And I think, I heard somebody say once, why would you sleep on a sheep hunt during the day? You got 350 days left in the rest of the year to sleep, right? So you might as well try. It's easy to say, but a little harder to do than to try not to nap when you're just gassed, right? So,
yeah, it definitely can be. There's so much discipline in sheep hunting, and it can be somewhat of a non-enjoyable experience sometimes, especially if you haven't trained. You think about it, you're battling the elements, you're hungry sometimes, you're tired, you're fatigued, and something hurts and sore. But it's that if you do get lucky and you do get a sheep down, then that's the time to be resting and sleeping and eating and doing all that stuff. And it seems to be a recipe that's worked for me over the years.
yeah, I mean, there's certainly no replacement for 110% as many days as you can possibly give it, right? Like that's really the success behind most sheep hunters, is just embracing the suck and grinding it out. Like you really have to, and it does take time. It takes years of trying, to be able to get disciplined enough to make sure you do that. Blake, is there any questions on terrain and stuff from the members? Did you see anything there?
Yeah, there's a couple different questions. One of them in the chat here is from Luke. He was just asking for people that aren't able to get boots on the ground ahead of season, and they sort of spend their time e-scouting. Are there any tips that you could share or clues that you have of on fat maps on Google Earth, like what looks like it could be good ram terrain or sheep terrain?
Yeah. Okay. So I spend a lot of time e-scouting as well. I'm a bit of a nerd that way, and like you are, Chuck, I know. And I would say, if you're looking in sheep country, I like to look for sort of some of the shale, the black shale, or the dark colored sort of cliff bands. You'll often see them bedding in that. Even in the middle of the day, they'll bed when it's blistering hot. For some reason, they like sitting in some of those sort of that darker colored shaly stuff. You know, it's hard to kind of just say this is exactly the one I look for. I look for escape terrain, so that's a really big one. They need to feel safe. What else?
What does escape?
So Kevin,
yeah, I was just going to ask, like, what does escape terrain look like to you? That's essentially, is it just like cliffy stuff for them to kind of run off into, or like, what would you define that as?
Yeah, it is for me. It's what I look for. Escape terrain. It's cliffy, but not too cliffy. You get too cliffy, you're in the mountain goat stuff. But surprisingly, sheep do go through there, no problem. So they, you know, those sheep will be up and feeding around, but they will always seem to be somewhere where they can run if they're threatened and be reasonably safe. So I've never found them out in the wide open flats. You know, if there was a wolf or a bear that they can run them down or somehow hunt them there, they don't seem to be out there when I find them. They're always sort of closer into the cliff areas or rolled over the top somewhere where they can quickly zip and dive into some cliffy sort of really rocky terrain, or steep enough that they can move quite easily with their footwear versus a grizzly bear, which I've seen lots over the years. Wolves and grizzly bears chase those sheep around, and so yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a really tough question. It's a great question, Luke. I'm not really sure if there's one exact or one or two sort of smoking guns that give it away for Ram Mountains.
okay, we got to take a break for a little funny comment here. You got to read Cole Hanks to Kevin. Did you see his, Blake?
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Dad.
I was just going to say Cole Hank, he says, allegedly he's the Stig of jet boat drivers. Some say he dislikes the use of UHMW due to added weight and forgiveness for F-ups.
That's cool.
Yeah, I figured you know where that was coming from.
Yeah, well, I mean, just a quick comment on that. I ran a couple of different boats up in the north there, and one, my sort of main work boat didn't have any plastic or UHMW on the bottom. But when you run the river, I actually didn't run that Shoshone River so many times that I memorized where most of the rocks were. So as long as you could get your boat to do what you want it to do, you were fine. And I'm not against UHMW. In fact, my other boat has some of that. So that's pretty funny. Thanks, Cole.
It is, yeah. That's awesome. So when you're working an area and you've glassed and not found sheep, at what point do you say, all right, it's time to move on? Because I know your system. You're pretty unique in this, in that your strategy is you go in quite a bit early. You don't go the day before. You have the luxury of knowing the areas. You've been in a lot of sheep country, and you do most of your work before the season. How long do you give an area, say a drainage that you had high hopes for? Is it 1 day, 2 days? Like, do you go by feeding cycles? Talk to us about that, Kev.
Yeah, a lot of those areas up there where I go, you can go up there and you'll find bands of rams in the same general area every year. I know guys that go hunt the same exact hillside on the same mountain every single year, and they have success. And so I try to stick away, or stay away from those types of areas. For me, it's not about killing a ram; it's about finding the special ram now. And I've found that through hunting non-traditional areas. But man, I spent a lot of time in some of those drains up there. Like, if you don't see sheep trails, if you don't see any of the sheep shit on the mountains, you kind of get a sense that maybe they're either, they could be around, or the sign's really old, but they might be in the, maybe a south-facing drainage or an east-facing drainage, not the one that you're in. And so you want to dump over and keep looking. So I kind of take all those factors when I into consideration when I look at a drain. if I know that there's sheep there from history or whatever, I'm spending more time there. But if I'm just cruising through, I'm looking. If I don't see some of those signs, I'm going to be moving on for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned to me that your tactics have changed a little bit over the last couple of years. You're starting to hit those fringe areas now because that's, like you said, you're not looking for quantity of sheep, you're looking for quality. And you put a lot of miles on, right? Like last year, I mean, how many K you guys had? You got pack rafts and everything on that last trip.
Yeah,
So,
we tried some new stuff last year. The last 3 hunts I've done was 88 kilometers, then 130 kilometers, and then the most was just under 200 kilometers. And that's because we're really, my partner and I are just really searching for special rams. And we saw last year, we saw Wayne Gretzky. It was 99 rams that we saw last year. And but we're also, to be fair, we're looking in some areas where there's a lot of different sheep and a lot of guys go. We're just looking for something that's extraordinary. And so I do now believe for myself that I'm focusing on fringe areas. Some of the timbered hillsides seem to hold some bigger rams. I've been quite fortunate and lucky and harvested a couple of tremendous sheep over the years, and they've come from non-traditional fringe areas. And the downside of that is you're not going to see that many sheep. If you really focus on those areas, you're not going to see as many sheep. But chances are they haven't been looked at, either by an outfitter or other hunters. They're going to be, have a greater chance at being sort of quality, bigger, older rams. I really love older rams. And yeah, so I mean, just really for me, my tactic has changed. You're right. I do focus on the fringe now for maybe the last 4 years. But before that, I was going into lots of those same areas that a lot of guys hunt, and you see lots of sheep, and it's great. And you see lots of legal rams. But I'm just really now more picky, I guess, getting older.
Well, you're getting older, but you're doing 200 kilometers on a trip. You're there for the adventure. Let's be honest, right? There's that plus the ram.
Yeah, we would go up a drain, and then we would go sort of take one detour, and that's like 15 kilometers one way, and then you come back 15 kilometers, and we would see lots of nice sheep up there, but just not something we're interested in. And my partner has the same mindset as me. We hunt well together. He's quite a sheep hunter himself, and he's really picky, and that's what attracts me to hunting with him. And so yeah, we definitely do. Those miles are like fast miles. When we're light, when you're going in a drain on a trail, and you're not able to look at any sheep, you're moving, and we actually hike quite fast. And so, yeah, we put on a lot of miles for sure. I don't know if I can keep that up, though. Getting really old.
Blake,
Kevin,
you had a question?
Yeah. You were talking about hunting timber a little bit earlier there. Caden was asking on Instagram. He was just wondering, like, do you have any thoughts or like tips on hunting timber areas? Any kind of knowledge or just ideas you could share about that?
That's hunting when I mean timber, it's not usually the thickest timber right to the top. You're not, because you can't obviously glass into there, but it's kind of that sparse timber. And it's tough. I mean, I do have a bit of knowledge, so I kind of do know where to look, but there was a really beautiful ram that we were lucky enough to harvest 4 or 5 years ago with my partner. And that ram lived in a timbered area, and I found that sheep by just fluke, by just camping out. I was in between trips of clients, and I just, like I always did, I would just hike up a mountain and camp and just look, just spend time up there. And it was a mountain that you would never think where sheep were on. I was looking for elk, and boom, there's a band of rams there, and I was able to find those sheep and watch them for years. I actually watched those rams for quite a few years, and then I went in there with my partner, and he was lucky to harvest that ram. And so there isn't a playbook for hunting timbered areas. It's tough. Some rams spend a little bit of time there, not all their time. You never know. But I definitely do look now more in those fringy areas and not just on those sexy green grassy hillsides that are at high elevation.
Well, that makes sense too, right? Because you might glass the sheep on the sexy grassy slope, one evening, then you go back the next morning and they're not there, and you're looking all over the mountain for them. Quite likely they're probably down in the timber, or there's a good chance of it. And like you said, in this case, you got lucky, right? But I'm just curious, Kev, is that the ram, the 44 birthday ram?
Yeah, that's right. You got her. Yeah.
Nice. All right. That's very cool. And thanks for sharing that picture. It just causes me nightmares every night now. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, people bug me to put more pictures out there I don't really do the social media or the internet thing with my photos. I'm pretty tight-lipped about things, and just personally, but I do enjoy helping a lot of people, but I just don't like to put my own personal rams too much out there.
Yeah, for sure.
That way. I'm a weirdo.
No, you're definitely not. You're just a sheep hunter, because that's how it rolls. Yeah. So what about locations for your camp? Is something that I was curious about. Like you like to be up top. So I know certain areas you just can't just race up the mountain because you come in from the bottom of a drainage. You could be scaring everything out of there as you move. What do you try to look for a location in terms of out of sight, out of mind from the sheep, or what's your strategy there?
Well, the complete sort of dream for a spot would be at elevation, near water, nice camping area, out of the wind, out of the weather, somewhere where you're not going to be seen by sheep. I never, and one of the things I don't do is I don't have fires. I just believe that announcing your presence, one way or the other it's just one thing. That's a want. And I have had fires. Full disclosure. There's times when I've been wet or whatever and I need a fire, but typically on a hunt, I won't have a fire until, maybe we harvest a ram or whatnot. But I like to be at elevation where I can see, where I can glass. And I remember there was 1 year up when I was running Riverjet that I pitched my tent. I actually wrote an article about this years ago, that in the morning from my tent, I set up the spotter and I crawled out of my tent. I was just kind of sitting next to the fly, and I looked around my tent and I spotted 52 rams from my tent. And it was amazing. I ended up actually harvesting a really nice ram that was over 170. And so I'd like to just camp. Some guys like to be down in the trees. I like to camp up high, but very inconspicuous. I'm not on the ridge where I'm going to be on a sheep trail or they're going to see movement. I'm sort of tucked into a little nook. And so I'm out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, I kind of agree with you on the fire. Because usually if there's more than one person and you light a fire, within 5 minutes, you're both talking. And before you know it, you're talking loud or you're snapping logs. And it's not just the fire and the smoke, it's the whole experience, right? So I could see that happening. I hunted with a couple of guys a couple of years ago that were dying to start a fire. And the spot we were in, Kevin, and that was the year we ended up taking a ram. And I made sure we camped on the backside of the bowl so that we were nowhere near them, where the wind was not blowing right up the valley. And I don't know if it helped or not, but you got to be aware of that. And some guys would probably argue and say it doesn't matter. They smell forest fires, but like my theory is it's not just the fire; it's the noise around the fire too.
Yeah, I don't know if it really affects the hunting or not. I just if there's a chance that it does, I'm going to minimize that chance. So that's why we don't.
Awesome. So once you found your ram that you want to take, how do you plan out your stock? I know obviously that's going to be situational, but in general, what are kind of like the top 3 things that you put top of mind before you even, put your spotter or binos away? What's the first 3 things you do when you're getting ready to make a stock on a ram?
Yeah, and the last few years that we've had success, this exact scenario has happened where we do see the ram the night before, put it to bed. We're up way before light, packed up, ready to go, going light, going fast. We've spotted them at sort of greater distances typically, so we have to cover a lot of distance, picking up the rams at first light, and I'm looking for a route where I can get into a shooting position that takes into account the wind. Obviously, we're all good hunters here, and we all know that the wind plays a really big factor. I'm typically getting closer. I'm not really a big fan of shooting these ultra long distances at sheep in the mountains. So I'm typically shooting them, 300 yards or below. And so, yeah, we look at wind and terrain, where we can hike that's completely out of sight. There has been the odd, slow belly crawl, which actually happened on that ram. Blake, I just see you put one there in the chat box there. That was a belly crawl, full view of the sheep. The sheep were 600 yards away, and we had to crawl 100 yards in full view. And that's discipline, painful to go so slow. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you can, avoid it and just get up on the backside of a spine and peek over. So yeah, when I'm planning that final stock, I'm taking into consideration the wind, the sun. Is the sun going to be in my eyes? I'd rather the sun be behind me in the sheep's eyes than mine. And you're right, Chuck. It's totally situational. So I just try and, as a hunter, just pick the best, most stealthy route up there with the wind in my favor. And there are times when I get up there and it's not possible. And or times you get up there, you take your eyes off the sheep, you get into position, and oh man, the rams aren't there; they're gone, and you have no idea where they are. And then you just got to pull out rather than wander around. We just pull out and reassess. So yeah, I mean it's situational for sure, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and I think we all have, if you've been around sheep, that if you're careful with your movement, you can actually get away with a little more than you think. I mean, I had experienced that a little bit myself. And again, I think if they're above you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if they're above you and they still feel safe and they see movement, they're probably not going to freak out too much. It's when they get your wind. And if you make an aggressive move, the belly crawl, it's probably hard to argue. I would imagine that the sheep saw you guys when you were belly crawling, right?
Well, we don't know that they were looking exactly at us, but we go so slow. It took us forever to sort of go that small distance. And then when we got out of sight, you're doing the mad dash to try and cover the ground. So I mean, I don't know. There are people that tell me that they walk. I had a gentleman actually act like a sheep. He went to the point of walking on all fours and simulating grazing the grass, and he got a 40-inch ram out of that. So
I wonder how much food he packed that day.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's I don't really know. I mean, I know the sheep are amazing what they can see. They can really spot that movement, like you're saying. And I have scared my fair share of rams for sure. So
yeah, exactly. So I forgot to ask you, are you a trekking pole guy? Do you pack poles now?
funny enough, I do now. For many years I did not, and I would tease some of the guys and call them training wheels. But now I totally pack 2 poles and never look back. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a pole guy too. This year I'm trying something different. I'm going to run one trekking pole, and I actually have one of those carbon fiber mountain sticks. So it's basically like an ice axe, but it's the shaft is carbon fiber. So I'm going to bring that along. It weighs almost the same as my carbon fiber trekking pole. So I'm going to try that. It's something you can glass off of it. You can shoot off of it. There's like obviously mechanical uses for, moving rocks and
Yeah.
stuff, but the poles
That's right.
really, they make a difference, man, on your both uphill, downhill, long hauls. I'm a believer too.
Yeah. No, I definitely am a fan of the trekking pole now for sure.
Okay, so now RAM is down. Can you offer any tips for the photos? I've seen some of your pictures; they're amazing. They're done off a cell phone, I'm sure. What are your kind of tips and tricks for guys once that the adrenaline is pumping and the RAM is down? As far as the first things you guys do.
Well, I mean, there are certainly some pictures I wish I was a professional photographer. They would have turned out a lot better. If you're my partner typically cuts the top part of my face off in a photo, so don't do that. But I would say, like, it's just having the light. The light is right. I actually do work in the film industry, so I know a little bit about how to take a photo. But having the light behind the camera, and there's a lot of guys wear a hat. Take off your hat so your face isn't in shadow, and just savor the moment and relax, and take a respectful photo too. I see a lot of guys. I just believe in, like, not tower, laying on top of it or putting a beer can on its hoof or whatever. It's just be respectful and give thanks. And so yeah, when the ram's down and you take your photo, I actually tape with my electrical tape that I have a little ring of it on my barrel of my rifle, and I just tape that to my tripod for my spotter, and just the 10-second timer. You do the mad dash and jump in behind, 3, 2, 1, click. So that's kind of what I would say, is just take more photos than what you think. And you can always delete them, but if you haven't taken any, you would be wishing you did. So
Yeah, exactly. And I always tell people when they look at the grip and grin, and everybody here on the platform knows my position on the grip and grin photos. I'm a believer. That photo is everything. It encapsulates the whole journey, the trip. And I always tell people, look at the trophy, but take a second and just look at the smile on the person's face or faces if it's two of you, because that tells the story right there. And that's honestly, that's the memory, that's the reminder of the memory that you're going to have for the rest of your life, right? So those pictures are super important, right?
Yeah, you always remember that. And it's funny, during the hunt, I would always see my customers, and they would come back and they'd worked so hard, and I would always tell them it's only sweat and it's never too far. And the third one, you've probably heard this, Chuck, is it builds character. And go out there, enjoy yourself, put it all out there. You won't remember the sore thighs at Christmas time when you're sipping rum and eggnogs, but you will, if you get lucky and you have an animal and you look at the wall and you bring back, those memories and share those memories. That stuff there is gold. And you don't really remember the sore legs and the sore feet and, oh, I got a blister, I can't go on. Like, just remember that after it's all said and done, that stuff all fades away, except those memories.
Yeah, exactly. No, you nailed it right on the head there, buddy. On the trophy care side of things, there's not a lot. There's a couple different opinions on salt and trophy care. And obviously in your case, most of the time it's early season, it's hot. And more often than not, you're a long ways from your jet boat. So how do you guys handle your cape and meat, I guess, as well, as far as the care side of things post hunt on your way out?
Yeah, so we debone all our sheep and take our time doing it. And we actually take everything out with the rams. You have to do that now. So we're taking neck meat and rib meat and all that stuff. It's surprisingly not even the biggest sheep that I've hiked out. I've been fortunate enough for a big Rocky and hiked that out. It's not that bad. And so I debone everything. The hide, I take the hide obviously off the skull, get rid of the lower jawbone, and just shave as much as you can off. Take your time with that hide. Your taxidermist will love you. And for salt, I typically don't bring that much. And the reason being is I bring enough for one cape. And so if we get lucky, and sort of last year we were lucky enough to harvest a couple of really, really nice rams, that salt is for that first cape. And you just need enough salt on there to slow down bacteria. You want to dry it. I usually put it up in the wind in the sun, up on the mountain on the rock, and it will dry in one afternoon if the wind's blowing. It actually will dry almost like it's quite hard and crinkly, almost like paper. And if you take off as much meat and just have the hide, all that moisture is gone and it becomes super light. It's awesome. But there are times when you can't do that, when it's pissing rain or foggy or whatever, you can't get it dry. You put that salt on there just to keep that bacteria down. We always use really good quality game bags. There's Caribou Gear makes some, Kuyu, like all the manufacturers make pretty good quality game bags. It protects it against the fly eggs. That can be a big problem. But getting that salt in there and turning your lips and your eyes and your ears, getting that salt rubbed in there and hanging your cape up, keeping it dry as much as you can. And then, what happened last year is we were lucky enough to harvest a second ram a few days later. And that when we do that, we are in going home mode. And if you keep your cape out of the, dry and as dry as you can, and you get it cooled down through the night, but don't let it sit in the sun and bake if it's down in the valley bottom. You want it definitely to be in the shade. That cape will stay cool in temperature, and you have a good amount of time to get out. So, we budget 2.5 days to get out back to where we're going, the boat or whatnot. And that cape's totally fine. And once we're at that boat or truck or wherever, then you have more salt there and you just pound the salt to it. But we're definitely taking, oh man, like maybe a pound of salt at the most. Not even.
So is that like a Gatorade bottle of salt, kind of what you do in your pack when one guy takes that up on the mountain?
Yeah, I'd always would recommend that at least. But for my partner and I, we take a little bit less just because we've gotten better over the years of like making the capes so they don't require as much salt. There's the less sort of meat and flesh on it, and taking the time to try and get everything turned quite thin, get all the hide thin and dried in the air in the sun there.
Yeah, and with regards to the meat, we had you mentioned quality game bags, and that's I personally can't stress that enough. I mean, it was 3 years ago when I was on the hunt with the sheep hunt with the two other guys I took, and we got a ram. I had a couple of good quality game bags with me, and the other guys had cheaper ones. And when we split all the meat up, I think there was like 3 or 4 bags of meat. When we got back to the river, we had about 3 days to wait for the jet boat to pick us up. And of course, we're consuming sheep meat every day, and we're enjoying it. And we pulled down the bags the other guys had, and they had flies and eggs on their meat. My bag of meat luckily had like the tenderloins and hindquarter in it. There was nothing. It was completely fine. So again, that's like you don't want to screw around with that for sure. We're actually going to do in the second segment in a couple of weeks. We're going to try and have a taxidermist on to talk about the actual trophy care and then a couple other guests I think we got lined up talking about meat as well. The other thing, I guess, I think it's important now with the new regulations. I mean, Blake and I have a CO in our family, so we hear all of this stuff. So with the new regulations on, wanton waste and packing out your meat, really important thing too is make sure once you have your carcass stripped down and completely all the meat off, take a ton of photos of that too, because there was issues a couple of years ago, not only with short sheep, but with, guys getting charged with not bringing the meat out. And at least if you have, good documented photos of your meat bags, you got photos of your carcass and photos of you eating it. I mean, take those too. Like, just in today's world, you never know, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to circle back quickly and say, leave the cheesecloth at home.
Exactly. Cheesecloth has no place in hunting. Corey Wilson, Blake, is asking, what knife are you using for skinning, Kevin? What do you use?
Yeah, so I bring 2 knives on my hunts. One stays in my pack, never comes out. It's like a Kestrel titanium ultralight knife. I just have it for whittling a stick. I never bring sort of a buck knife or like a heavy knife. And my skinning knife is I use just a Havalon, just the smaller Havalon with I bring like half a dozen blades. I can do a whole sheep with one blade if I'm careful and not snap them when I'm doing the joints. But I use a Havalon knife. That's all I bring.
Right on. What do we have any? There's another question up there too, I think, from Luke, right? Blake?
Yeah, we got a couple questions. Let's see. And by the way, if anyone else has questions, now would be a good time. Dump them in the chat, and we'll try and get to some. But I see Caden was asking just your opinion, your experience, early season versus late season for finding rams. I guess maybe just more generally, do you do any late season hunting for sheep? Like, what's your thoughts on that sort of thing?
Yeah. My pattern lately has been later season for other sheep species. I've been helping some friends try and get their big horns, even the Kootenays. And but I don't usually go for stone sheep later into the year. Normally it's beginning of the year because I'm looking for that one special ram. And those great big ram nowadays, they don't last very long. They get seen by outfitters or other residents. And so you have to be Johnny on the spot. And it does have its drawbacks going really early in August and sort of late July. It can really be mentally challenging if you find a big ram to sit on it for 5 days. Another group of hunters can come in and not see you and shoot that ram on opening day. You never know. So it does have its drawbacks. I hunt the early season, but I've hunted stones late as well. I wouldn't say more mature rams at the end of the year. Some guys might disagree, but if they're mature at the late season, they were mature at the early season. And so if you know where to look for them and how to get to them, you can harvest a really nice mature ram at the beginning of the season that nobody else has laid eyes on, or, if you're first and you're there. And so I would say I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think given the nature of, your history at Riverjet, you had that opener was your opportunity to hunt, right? And that's, I would assume made that decision, right? You drop your 2 runs of guys off the milk run, and then you've got that 10-day window to get it done. So, the rest of the time during the season, you were hauling elk hunters, right? So
yeah, for sure. We would sort of go around the other groups and make sure we never interfered with them. And so, yeah, you're right. Early August was my time. And I mean, it's a lot of bugs then in August. That's kind of that really sucks. But
that's true. Very true.
September's really nice up there. When you're hearing the elk and whatnot. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So just a thing for the guys that are still dropping questions, what we'll do is we'll keep those questions. We'll screenshot them, and maybe we'll get Kevin to answer them on the platform afterwards. So I think we're
Yeah.
we're zeroing in on an hour and a half, and there's a couple things. There's just one little segment left. I think we covered pretty much A to Z on sheep hunting, and lots of good info and tips there. But I'm dying to hear a couple stories. I definitely want to hear the rest of the story on the birthday ram for your buddy. Obviously, yeah, I'll leave it up to you. You tell us that story, Kevin, and then I would also like to hear your first ram story. If you could share those two with us, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the birthday ram story, like I mentioned earlier, was up in the mountains, glassing sort of areas you would not ever look for stone sheep in, and happened to find a group of small rams there, or a small group of rams, a small group of big rams. How's that? And I just watched them over the years. I knew that, they weren't in areas that most guys would ever look. And so I actually watched them the first year. Then the second year I hiked in there and they were still there. And there was one tremendous ram in that group. And I took photos of him actually got quite close and took pictures of him. And it was neat just to have an area to grow those sheep. And I sent photos to my friend, and the way I work is we would alternate. One year I would be first up, one year he would be first up, and that year he was first up, and I took him into that spot on the third year, and we ended up hiking in there and finding that sheep. And he's actually a really good shot, but oh man, he boffed it on that shot. He missed it completely. And I have it all on video, which is even better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens. And I remind him about it quite often, actually. But the Rams he missed it on the first shot. And this was right at the opener. And the Rams went like 50 yards and all bunched up. And he was asking me, like, Kev, which Ram is it? And I'm like, it's the one with the big effing horns looking right at you. And that ram was right in the front, and made a great shot on the next shot, and got that ram. And we walked up to that. It was really special moment for me to have my buddy, he'd come up every year and kind of tap dance around my work and Riverjet up there. And he came up, and it was really neat to be able to bring him in and have him harvest such a big sheep. And so I mean, that was kind of the story with that ram. And what was the other one, Chuck? I forgot.
Well, first I just a couple comments there. So that ram was 44 inches, right?
Yeah, that ram was 44 inches. He's got a beautiful life mount in his house.
Yeah. Right on. And that was his 44th birthday, right?
That's right. Yeah. And he'd actually, when I put the spotter up in those sheep, I said, hey, Scott, come over and look at this. And he looked at those rams and he's like, oh, nice ewes and lambs over there. And I'm like, look closer. And he actually got that one look, and I saw his face just change, and it was really cool to see that. And so we were really focused after that on that one particular sheep. And there was 3 other really nice legal rams with that, but I just was happy to get him that nice, or he put in the work too to get that ram. It was
no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, just for your information, I'm 55, so I consider myself a friend, and I'm 55. So I don't know if you got anything else in your pocket like that. Just let me know.
We can take a photo of the ram in Fort Nelson at the museum there.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. No, we just want to hear the last segment here is let's talk about your very first sheep hunt. Just walk us through, how that worked. You said you were solo, right, on that one?
Your
first successful ram.
I hunted a lot solo. Yeah, I've taken quite a few sheep, different kinds of the sheep solo, and my stone sheep one was one of my proudest moments, because I had gone into an area that, you ask around, like, people had told me, do not go into this area. There's no sheep in there. They've been shot out. And I just wanted to go look and pound out the trails, just see where all the trails went and what was in there. And I'd gone in there, and there was a good number of rams in there. And So I ended up seeing that ram. The morning I actually saw all those rams out of my tent was the morning I saw 52 rams and saw that beautiful sheep. And I'm sure there's bigger ones out there, but man, he looked pretty big to me at the time. And I went up there and got him. And that's when satellite phones were a thing. It was before we had the texters. And I called my buddy, my sheep hunting partner, couldn't come with me that time. And I was sitting on this ram in a avalanche chute with rocks coming down once in a while, little rocks, and I phoned him from the sheep, and I think I actually might have cried, but I was pretty emotional. It was pretty special, and phoned my buddy, and he was working on the roof of a house, nailing away and putting things together, and it was such a cool feeling to be. He wasn't there, but he was there in spirit. So that was really neat. And so I hiked out, deboned that ram, and I hiked it out. And back then I didn't know as much about sheep back then. I knew it was a really nice ram, but it was just the biggest one that I saw. And when we were hiking, or when I was hiking out, I had actually come to a grizzly bear on the trail hiking in, and we had the total like standoff, the Mexican standoff on the trail, and who's going to make the move first. And we ended up doing the do-si-do, like out of the movies, where he went one way and I went the other, and he could smell that meat in my pack. But yeah, once I got around, man, I've never hiked so fast in my life. That pack was heavy, but I didn't feel a single pound. And I actually wore all the skin off my lower back there, and got that ram back, and I ended up stopping at a camp on the way back, and they were like looking at this thing like, do you know what you got here? I was like, yeah, it looks like a big ram to me. He's like, that is a tremendous sheep. And I actually have that ram is one of my most special sheep, and it's life mounted out in the other room there. And yeah, so I was really lucky, but it was a lot of hard work, man. Like, it's luck, but I put on a lot of miles over the years.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Wow, that's cool. What a great story, Kev. Both of those stories are awesome. Well, thanks for sharing those. Blake, looks like we got time to probably rapid fire through a couple of questions if we want to try and knock them out here. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, I'll just read off a couple to you, Kev. First one's from Luke. He sounds like he might be doing a pack raft trip this year. He's thinking about planning it. Any tips from your experience on how to reduce weight, knowing you got to plan for water travel and just your typical hiking gear?
Well, you're going to be adding weight with a pack raft. I've done it once. I don't think I'm going to do it again. Just be for reducing weight. There really isn't much way to reduce weight. We used it as a tool to sort of get out. And we had loaded packs with sheep. They were great it was a really great tool to get a lot of weight fast out of there. Probably should have stopped before the big rapids and pulled out, but we decided we went through the rapids, and I would totally recommend to err on the side of caution. I've been around rivers a lot, and I made a mistake there and should not have gone down the rapids. And so I would say be extra cautious around water. Take off your boots, take off your rain gear. So I mean, so for weight, that's a tough one. Like the rafts now, they're like 6 pounds with the paddle, carbon fiber shaft paddle, and they're great. I mean, we liked it, but I don't have one tip to sort of shave weight. You're gonna, if you're going traveling with it, we don't really have too many rivers in BC here that you can sort of go in with a raft and sort of hunt right off your raft the whole way. So yeah.
Nice. Okay, let's jump to another question then. So Cole asked a couple of questions. He was wondering, what do you keep in your boat as fail-safe items? And then if you were to buy another boat, what would you pick for sheep?
Yeah. Thanks, Cole, for that question. I'm a big jet boater, and I carry a turfer, a manual turfer, not chainsaw winch or anything motorized. It's got to be manual with a bunch of cable. That's a fail-safe thing for me. I've used it a ton. I do bring a little power saw. Typically, I'm cutting out logs. Let me think here. I bring a push pole. Let's see here. Yeah.
What about
all the
spare
gear.
parts
You wanna
for the
have all
boat?
the safety. Sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, what about essential spare parts, breakdown parts for a boat?
Yeah.
Anything in particular
Well,
you recommend?
sure. Like a lot of the guys run the little sport jet boats. So you want to have spare fuel filters, a spare impeller wrench. And if let's see, I mean, there's not much. You want to be using your boat ahead of time under load. A lot of guys would say my boat ran great, but when I put it in the river with all this extra gas and went upstream and all the gear, you're running your motor, so you're working it so hard, problems would arise. So you want to definitely iron those out ahead of time. Yeah, I mean, that's just make sure you have all the safety gear, have your in reach, have a good plan, tell people where you are, and don't rely on other people to come rescue you. So I did a lot of rescues over the years, and some people showed up with nothing, knowing that if they had a problem, I would be on the river to help them. And I always did, but I do believe in being totally prepared. Yeah.
For sure. And then the question about if you're buying another boat, what would that be?
Wow.
You got a pretty nice little boat, the one you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, I mean, I run Riddle Marine boats. A lot of guys here in the province run the little Firefish boats. They're all, every manufacturer. It's like gear, boots, whatever, packs. They all make decent stuff. You know, if you're looking for a boat to do lots of backcountry remote sheep hunting trips, you want to have more of a flatter bottom, like an 8-degree bottom, a robust, build, have lots of stringers in there. My boats are typically a little bit wider, so I can take quite a bit of gear in there. And the boat I have now is a 15-foot center console boat. It's it's not the most comfortable boat. You're standing up all the time, but there's trade-offs there. I can sort of slide over a gravel bar if I need to. I can jump a log if I need to. When I get to the spot where I'm going, the boat gets winched right out of the river into the bush, so I don't have to worry about it. A great big heavy V8 boat to do. It's a lot harder than that. And when you do hit with a big V8 boat, it's you're typically going to leave a mark. You're going to know it. And the little sport jet boats seem to bounce off, and they don't dent as bad. And yeah, so boats are quite personal, like gear. And like I said, I run the boat that worked for me for many years. Those like a 15-foot center console boat. I wouldn't go any larger with a sport jet. Definitely, I had an 18-footer with a sport jet, and that was too big for that motor, that power plant. So keep it 15, 16 feet, and make sure that you can pack the gas that you need. That's a big one.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest one, right? What are you going to do without gas? Pretty simple.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all the
you're
time.
done.
So,
all right. Any more questions?
Yeah, we got the last one here. This is Marty. He was just asking if you could scout one time prior to the hunt, how far out would you try to plan that trip?
oh, good question, Marty. Prior to the hunt, I would spend pretty much most of July hiking. So it's kind of hard to answer that. But if I had to go, I would typically go early July. If you can stand the bugs, the water's usually high. You can get where you need to go, even with a bigger boat that you wouldn't normally be able to get to. And that's boating wise. But if you're flying or driving, go July. Go July. It's those rams are on their summer range. They're not going to go onto their winter range. They're not going to change too much. They're going to be in those areas. And June can be problematic for weather. So yeah, I would pick early July. Yeah, Marty.
Right on. Good stuff. All right. We are encroaching on our 2 hours, which I knew this would happen. I figure with Kevin we could do like 6 series just with you alone, buddy. So
Yeah, sorry. I try not to nerd out about any one subject.
No.
So apologies if
Hey,
I
look.
did, guys.
I had 2 pages of questions, and I'm sure I could come up with 3 more. Oh, wait a second. Cole's got one last question right at the wire. In a sport jet, what amount of fuel do you budget per kilometer? I guess that depends on a few things too, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Cole. I mean, it depends. Like how depends on the depth of the river, on the speed of the water, the size of the boat.
The weight.
Typically, like the most common boat I would see up there is like a 15, 16 footer, like an outlaw boat or that style. And, if you bring enough, you got to kind of know where you're going and how far, and you should be doing all these calculations ahead of time. You don't want to find this out on the river and be flagging myself or not myself, but somebody else down. Like I know some of the rivers, there's regular traffic. Some of the locals are on there all the time. Especially around Fort Nelson. So, yeah, it's really tough to say per kilometer that you use. I do it. I know just from memory for the different areas, and it makes a big difference if you're going up or downstream, and whether you're the early season water, and we'll just use the Kachika River as an example, is a popular one, or the Muskwa River, that's another popular one. Those early season hunts, that the water's really pushing and boiling in the deep pools, and you use a lot more fuel, like way more than you think with a sport jet platform, for sure. Yeah, they just don't have the grunt to keep you going in that boily, pushy water when you're climbing, especially in the rapids.
Right on. Well, we're in the last 5 minutes before the platform actually shuts us down. So we've gone right to the wire.
Happy to keep going until you guys cut me off. That's fine.
Well, I think what we're gonna do, we're gonna definitely ask you to come back on. Blake and I just love to chat with you and visit and pick your brain as much as we possibly can. But I think we're going to. Okay, last question. What is the Ram score behind you? This is from Caden Romaine. Did you score that one?
I might know you, Caden.
Yeah, you do. I know you do.
But that Ram there is. I've actually never had that Ram officially scored. That Ram was my dream Ram, and I never actually had it officially scored. I laid a tape on it green, and put it in the freezer, which I found out after you shouldn't do, but it did shrink quite a bit. But when I taped him the other day, he was, let's just say he's over 175.
Nice.
Wow.
That's awesome. And there's one last dart that came from one of your buddies who I know as well. Mr. Hank has a comment from your buddy, Mr. Pollock. And he says, your pack is so light because he carries all your shit.
You
knew somebody out there. Yeah.
He also carries my rock collection up the mountain.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Kevin. Well, thank you. Thanks again for taking the time. Yeah. You've been a huge supporter of not just Blake and I, but the platform, and a great friend to so many sheep hunters and mountain hunters for that matter. And I think the whole community was excited to see you on here tonight. And if you're so gracious, we'd like to get you back on again at some point.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Love to come back and talk, and hopefully there's a little tidbit info there for your audience. And really, like I said before, I actually feel just super blessed and honored to be invited on here. So thank you, Chuck and Blake. That's fantastic. And yeah, we'll have to go for a beer for sure. Talk sheep
You got
hunting.
it, buddy.
Definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks again,
Thanks, Kev.
Kev. We're gonna wrap it up. All right, everybody. We got segment number 3 tomorrow night. We got Kyle Stelter and the Wild Sheep crew are going to be on for a roundtable. We're going to give them the keys to Spike Camp, so we'll see how that goes. So join us there, and then watch for the part 2, July 11, 12, and 13. So keep your eye on our socials and on the platform. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.